My name is Mary Chandler, and 3 weeks ago I died for 14 seconds. At least that's what the nurse told me when I woke up staring at a ceiling of harsh white lights in the ICU. I didn't feel dead. I felt heavy. My chest ached from the paddles, my throat raw from the tube they'd shoved down it. I turned my head slow and shaky to see if anyone was there. The chair beside my bed was empty. So was the windowsill. No flowers, no card, just a styrofoam cup of water with a straw that had gone dry. I caught the name on the nurse's badge, Kevin, and asked in a voice I barely recognized, "Where's my family?" He hesitated. His eyes darted away toward the chart at the end of my bed. They're not here right now? I thought maybe they'd gone home to rest or to grab fresh clothes. I didn't think not here meant not in the same state. Not until I saw the folded sheet of lined paper on the tray by my left hand. It wasn't a get well note, just 7 words in my daughter's handwriting back in 10 days. Hope you're better by then. I stared at it until the letters blurred. 10 days. 10 days I would spend hooked up to machines listening to the steady beep of the monitor, reminding me I was still here without a single familiar voice to answer me. That night after shift change, I heard Kevin on the phone. His voice was low, but I caught every word. "Yes, ma'am, she's stabilized. Yes, she's conscious now. Would you like to speak to her?" A pause, then softer. "Okay, got it." He didn't know I heard, but I did. My own daughter had refused to take the call. I lay there under the glare of the fluorescents, feeling my heartbeat thud against the bandages, and something settled hard in my chest. It wasn't grief, not yet. It was the first flicker of something colder. And when they finally came back 10 days later, they would find out exactly what that meant. They wheeled me out 2 mornings later with a paper bag of prescriptions and a warning not to climb stairs alone. The hospital transport van smelled like hand sanitizer and old coffee. When we turned onto my street in Portland, the porch light on my Craftsman bungalow was still burned out a bulb I'd meant to change before the stroke. The driver helped me to the door, then waited while I reached into the ceramic planter where I kept the spare key. Empty. I pressed the doorbell and heard my own chime echo through the house I'd paid off a decade ago. No footsteps, no voices, just the driver asking if I wanted him to call someone. I told him I'd be fine and watched his taillights fade, then eased myself down the steps and sat until the neighbor across the street. Mr. Harkin backed his truck out. He saw me, frowned, and jogged over. "Mary, you're home." "Looks like it," I said. "Do you happen to have a phone number for a locksmith?" He did. 30 minutes later, a woman with a tool belt popped the deadbolt in under a minute, and I stepped into a house that felt like a stage set, built from my memory. The sofa was at the wrong angle. The rug was rolled to one side. 2 of the picture hooks on the hallway wall were naked where our wedding photos used to hang. A streak of primer cut across the dining room like a bandage pulled halfway off. On the table sat a glossy flyer with my address and a headline, "Charming Bungalow" in sought-after Arbor Lodge. My stomach went cold. Beside it lay a manila folder with photocopies of a power of attorney. I recognized only in the vaguest way forms my daughter had rushed under my pen 2 years earlier when I'd had a minor procedure and morphine made everything soft around the edges. A soft chime sounded from the kitchen. I followed it to the island where an iPad lay unlocked, the blue bubbles of a text thread spilling across the screen. "If Mom's not back by Sunday, we start the intake. House should list Monday." Lauren's name was at the top. Jack's reply blinked in gray. "Finally, we'll get some breathing room." I didn't call them. I opened a drawer, found my ledger, and flipped to the page with an old name I hadn't used in years. Then I dialed Daniel Rhodes. Daniel picked up on the second ring, his voice warm but edged with surprise. "Mary, it's been, 15 years?" 17, I said, and I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important. I told him everything, the ICU, the note, the flyer, the power of attorney. He listened without interrupting, just the faint scratch of a pen in the background. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. "They jumped the gun," he said. "Even with a general POA, they can't transfer real estate without your explicit consent. If you want to stop this, you'll need to act fast. How fast by tomorrow? I glanced at the half-painted wall, the boxes stacked in the hall. Tomorrow felt like a lifetime too late. Daniel cleared his throat. If you can get to my office by 8 in the morning, I'll have the paperwork ready. We'll revoke the POA, reinstate your legal autonomy, and take control of the sale ourselves under your name. It was the first time in days my lungs didn't feel wrapped in barbed wire. Do it. That night, I moved quietly through the house, opening drawers, checking closets. Half my clothes were folded into donation bags in the guest room. Jewelry boxes sat open with their velvet throats bare. They'd even boxed up the cookbook my mother gave me the year I got married. I found my small fireproof safe behind the coats in the hall closet, spun the dial, and pulled out the things that mattered: my passport, my grandmother's wedding band, the ledger of accounts and passwords I'd been keeping since '96. I tucked them into a canvas tote along with a bundle of emergency cash and set the bag by the door. When I lay down that night, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about the look on Lauren's face when she realized she couldn't touch any of it. And by morning, that thought was enough to get me out of bed and into a cab headed downtown. Daniel's office was in a narrow brick building wedged between a bakery and a hardware store. The scent of cinnamon rolls hit me as I stepped out of the cab, and for a second it was almost enough to make me forget why I was there. Almost. He was waiting in the lobby, sleeves rolled up, tie crooked, like he hadn't bothered to fix it yet. "Come on back," he said, ushering me past a desk stacked with manila folders. We sat across from each other at a table littered with legal pads and coffee rings. Daniel slid a set of documents toward me. "This revokes the power of attorney effective immediately. This," he tapped another, "authorizes you and only you to execute any sale or transfer of the property. Once it's filed, they have no authority over your assets." I signed without hesitation, each pen stroke steady despite the ache in my wrist. He made copies, called a courier, and by the time his assistant brought me tea, the papers were already en route to the county clerk. Next came the part I hadn't let myself say out loud until that moment. "I want to sell the house myself," I told him, "on my terms, and I want it gone before they're back." Daniel didn't blink. "Cash buyer, no contingencies. I know a couple of investors who will take it as is." By noon, he had a photographer scheduled for that afternoon and a locksmith to meet me back at the house. We changed every lock front, back, even the shed before the photographer arrived. I stood in the corner while he took wide shots of rooms that didn't look like mine anymore. When he was done, I walked him out, locked the door, and leaned against it. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. I could have cried then, but I didn't. Crying was for people who still believed they'd been wronged by accident. I knew better, and with the locks changed and the sale in motion, I was ready for the next step, one they'd never see coming. The next morning, I waited until the street outside was quiet before I started packing. Not the way they had, shoving things into garbage bags without asking, but carefully choosing only what I wanted to take. My late husband's watch went into a small velvet pouch. A shoebox of letters from my college years slid into the tote beneath the ledger. Everything else could stay. Let them come home to empty rooms and wonder how it happened. I called a storage facility on the edge of town, paid cash for a small unit, and spent the afternoon ferrying boxes back and forth in a borrowed van from Mr. Harkin. By the time the sun set, the only furniture left was a folding chair, a card table, and the bed I planned to abandon. Back inside, I pulled out my checkbook and closed every bank account my name shared with theirs. Daniel had helped me open a new one at a credit union under the name Margaret Wynne, my grandmother's maiden name. I transferred what I could electronically, then withdrew the rest as cashier's checks and cash. That night, I sat at the folding table with a peanut butter sandwich and 2 envelopes in front of me, one for Lauren, one for Jack. Each held a single sheet of paper with the same sentence: "You taught me who you really are. Thank you for the education." I placed them on the kitchen counter where they couldn't miss them. Just before dawn, I loaded the last of my bags into the trunk of my old silver Corolla. I slipped the house key from my ring and set it in the center of the table between the letters. Then I stepped outside, locking the door for the last time. The air was cool and damp, the kind that settles into your lungs and stays there. When I turned the ignition, the car shuddered like it was waking from a long sleep. So was I. By the time the sky turned pink, Portland was in my rearview mirror, and the only thing ahead was a stretch of highway I didn't plan on looking back over. I drove north without a map, letting the highway signs make my decisions. Washington blurred past in shades of gray and evergreen, then Idaho with its cold, open fields. By the third day, I crossed into Maine on a whim, lured by a billboard that read Harborside, the friendliest town on the coast. Harborside was smaller than I expected, one main street lined with clapboard shops, a harbor dotted with lobster boats, and the smell of salt baked into the air. I found a room above a bait shop, $120 a week, paid in cash to a man named Jim, who only asked if I smoked. When I said no, he handed me a key on a frayed blue lanyard and told me to use the side stairs. I became Margaret Wynne the moment I stepped inside that room. Retired school teacher from Virginia, widowed, no children. The lie slid off my tongue easier than I thought it would. By the end of the week, I'd found the library 2 rooms tucked into a brick building near the harbor and offered to shelve books twice a week. That's where I met Olivia, a waitress at the diner across the street. She was 28 with tired eyes and a 6-year-old son named Ben, who liked dinosaurs and peanut butter crackers. It didn't take long for Ben to start calling me Grandma Maggie. The first time Olivia apologized, but I waved it off. I didn't correct him. The days settled into a quiet rhythm, mornings at the library, afternoons helping Olivia with Ben so she could pick up extra shifts, evenings walking the harbor. I kept a small notebook under my pillow filled with the details of my false life date stories, even a fake high school mascot just in case I ever slipped. No one asked questions here. In a town that's small, everyone assumed you were running from something, and they respected you more for it. For the first time in months, I felt invisible, safe. I didn't know then that safety has an expiration date, and that mine was about to run out. 2 months passed before the outside world found me again. By then, Harborside felt less like a hiding place and more like a home. I knew the harbor's tides by heart, the names of every regular at the diner, and which days the library got its book deliveries. It all unraveled over a sheet cake and paper streamers. Ben's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday, and Olivia rented the VFW hall across from the diner. It was a simple party pizza from the corner shop juice boxes and a folding table covered with mismatched plates. I sat next to Ben while he tore into his presents, helping him read the cards out loud. One of the moms filmed a short clip for Instagram, just 30 seconds of Ben unwrapping a toy truck, while I handed him the next gift. I didn't think twice about it. 3 days later, Olivia burst into the library, phone clutched in her hand. Her face was pale. "Maggie, you need to see this." The video had been reposted by a local parenting blog, then picked up by a TikTok account that specialized in small-town finds. They'd matched my face to old news screenshots from Portland, the ones about the mother whose children tried to sell her house while she was in the ICU. The caption was blunt, "Found her. Mom gone, ghost in Maine." Worse, they'd tagged Harborside. I felt the air leave my lungs. Comments poured in, some calling me a hero, others accusing me of abandoning my real family. My name, my location, my picture, they were everywhere again. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed my tote with cash documents and the bare essentials in case I had to leave before sunrise. The next morning, I saw a black SUV with Oregon plates creeping past the library. The driver parked too neatly, like someone still trying to earn a gold star. I didn't have to see her face to know. Lauren had found me. She stepped out of the SUV wearing jeans, a navy cardigan, and that same expression she used to wear when she wanted to smooth things over without admitting fault. In her hands was a paper cup from the coffee shop down the block, steam curling into the cold air. I stayed behind the stacks in the library for a full 5 minutes watching her through the front windows. She didn't pace. She didn't knock. She just stood there like the building would eventually come to her. When I finally walked outside, her eyes widened as if she wasn't sure I was real. "Mom," she said, and the word cracked halfway out. "Please don't walk away." I didn't move closer. "You're not a ghost." She tried again. "You're not done. You can come home." I met her gaze steady. "I already had the funeral, Lauren. You just weren't there." She flinched like I'd slapped her. For a moment, I thought she'd get angry, blame her brother, her husband, the timing, anything to rewrite the truth. But she didn't. She just tightened her grip on the coffee cup. "We didn't know," she whispered. "We thought we were helping." I let out a laugh, short, sharp, and ugly. "Helping you left me in a hospital bed to die, and when I didn't, you tried to pack me up like an old couch you didn't want anymore. Don't tell me you didn't know." She started to cry, then not the public kind with careful tears, but the silent, trembling kind that left her mouth pressed in a hard line. "I'm not coming back," I told her. "I've built something new, something better, one that doesn't involve pretending we were ever okay." I walked away slow and deliberate, letting her stand there with the coffee cooling in her hands. It wasn't for show. It was the only closure I was ever going to give her. 2 days later, the library's inbox pinged with a new message. The sender's name tightened something in my chest: Lauren Chandler. Her email was short: 1 visit, no cameras, no one else, just me. I stared at it for a long time, fingers hovering over the keys. I didn't owe her anything, but curiosity has a way of sliding under locked doors. Finally, I typed back, 1 visit. Bring the letter. We met the following Saturday at a small cemetery just outside Harborside. I'd driven past it a dozen times but never stopped. The place was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through bare branches. I chose a bench near a headstone engraved with nothing I recognized: neutral ground. Lauren arrived wearing a cream blouse, slacks, and heels that sank into the soft earth. In her hands was a large envelope, the kind used for legal papers. She didn't say hello, just sat down a few feet away and handed it to me. Inside was the letter I'd written in the ICU, my handwriting shaky, my words uneven. "If I don't wake up, know I forgave you already. If I do, please come. I'm scared." This copy was covered in blue ink, notes scribbled in the margins. I didn't know it was that serious. I thought Jack would go. I was scared too. "I didn't need you to be strong," I said quietly. "I needed you to show up." She nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "You think I don't hate myself? You think I sleep at night? I think you sleep better than I did," I answered. Her voice broke. "We were selfish. We thought we had time." "So did your father," I said, looking at the stone. She asked if she could visit again. I told her no. She asked if she could write. I told her to send it to a P.O. box and not expect an answer. When she reached for a hug, I stepped back firm but not cruel. "That part of me," I said, "you already buried." The next morning, I sat at the little table in my rented room with a fresh sheet of paper in front of me. This letter wasn't for Lauren or Jack or anyone who had ever shared my last name. It was for me. "You did it," I wrote at the top. 2 simple words steady in black ink. "You got out." I listed what I'd left behind: a house that no longer felt like home, a name that had been dragged through public pity and scandal, a family who measured my worth in square footage and account balances. Then I listed what I'd gained: mornings that began in quiet instead of argument, real conversations that didn't circle back to what I could give: a child's laughter that came with no strings attached, and a friend in Olivia who saw me as a person, not as an obligation. I folded the letter, slipped it into a plain envelope, and wrote on the front, "Margaret Wynne Keep." It went into the shoebox under my bed alongside Ben's crayon drawings, and the only photograph I kept of Lauren and Jack taken when they were young enough to still reach for my hand in a parking lot. That afternoon, I helped Olivia trim the hedges in front of her porch. Ben came running up from the yard holding something small in his palm. "Grandma Maggie, look what I found." It was a chipped seashell, the kind with ridges that fit perfectly between your fingers. "Perfect," I said. "Let's go build something with it." We sat in the sand for the next hour, stacking shells into crooked towers while the tide crept closer. It wasn't about fixing the past. It wasn't about forgiving anyone. It was about the fact that for the first time in years, I felt whole, without needing anything from the people I used to call my own. By the end of that week, the letter to myself was still in the shoebox, untouched, but I'd read it twice just to be sure the words stayed real. The mornings in Harborside were starting to cool a crisp bite in the air that hinted at winter. I found myself lingering on the harbor walks watching gulls dive for scraps and the lobster crews haul in their traps. Life here didn't ask questions. No one cared what kind of car I drove or why I didn't have family photos on the wall. My new name, fit as easily as the worn cardigan I wore to the library. One evening, Olivia invited me over for dinner. She made chicken stew, the kind that fills the whole house with warmth. Ben insisted I sit next to him, shoving a coloring book toward me while he told me about his day at school. The conversation was ordinary, unremarkable, and that was exactly what I needed. Afterward, I walked home under a sky scattered with stars, the salt air sharp in my lungs. Passing the post office, I glanced at the P.O. box I'd given Lauren, wondering if anything was inside. I didn't stop. Back in my room, I set the chipped seashell on the windowsill, its ridges catching the moonlight. I thought about the house in Portland, about the empty rooms they'd walked into, about the look on Lauren's face in the cemetery. None of it felt close anymore. This was my life now, a small town with no history attached to my name, a child who called me Grandma Maggie, and a friend who never once asked me to prove my worth. I turned off the lamp, the harbor's faint bell carrying through the window. I wasn't Mary Chandler, the abandoned mother. I wasn't the headline they'd twisted or the ghost they'd tried to chase. I was Margaret Wynne, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be.